welcome to Climax. My name is Krista Chris, and hello from every part of the world where you are watching me from. Today on Climax, we have someone very, very special. Did I just say very, very special? Scratch that. This person is special. You're going to know why very shortly. But I'm actually referring to Lieutenant Christopher Uchenna Obasi, Flight Lieutenant Christopher Obasi. That's the person I'm referring to. And you're going to know very shortly why I consider him a very special guest. So very shortly, you're going to hear from him. You're going to know what he's doing. You're going to know the impact he's making in our society. But something actually made me go look for him. This man is making waves everywhere. He's making waves. His name is everywhere. His books are everywhere. And I said to myself, I'm gonna look for him. Tell me, how many times do you hear that military officers tend to write books? But that aside, the reason we have him on set today is as a result of the uniqueness of his book. Guys, I was listening to him talk before this interview and I was amazed. Like, I was blown away. And when I went through the book, I was, woo, who are you? Who are you? I said, please, I know you are a celebrity. Please, come on set. Let us hear from your mouth. Let us hear what you are doing. So if you're listening to me or watching me and you haven't ordered his book, go and grab your copy now. Don't say I did not tell you. Let me tell you the title of his book, by the way, so that you would understand what I'm saying. Okay, his book is titled Beyond the Battle: Understanding Strategic Military Intelligence from a Nigerian Perspective. The title alone. Go and read this book. Go and pre-order for this book so that you would understand what I'm saying. But I don't need to talk too much. By the time you hear him, you would understand and know why you should go and grab your copy. So thank you, Mr. Obasi, for doing us the honors of coming on set. So please tell us, introduce yourself to the viewers, let them hear you and tell us what really inspired you. How did you get this title of this book? And how did you get the content? Where did the inspiration come from? So many questions to ask you. So please answer it. So we'll be connecting to Mr. Obasi right now as you hear from him.
Good evening and thank you for having me. I am Christopher Uchenna Obasi, author of Beyond the Battlefield: Understanding Strategic Military Intelligence from a Nigerian Perspective. Well, my journey and motivation as a writer dates back to my days at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka Department of Political Science, where I had my first degree. I remember having made an intellectual contribution at that time to the Journal of the National Association of Political Science Students, UNN chapter, and the title of that contribution was Towards a More Functional Comparative Federalism. That contribution was motivated by the suspicion of a fault in the methodology of one of the courses we were doing in class, which was titled Comparative Federalism, where we suddenly saw ourselves making comparisons between the United States of America, a truly federal state for all intents and purposes, and a quasi-federal state like the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And I felt that such comparison amounted to nonsense and a total waste of time, because it was analogical to comparing a bowl of food to a loaf of bread. I therefore felt that a more meaningful comparison would be between two loaves of bread, so that I can now begin to talk about the differences in texture, the differences in packaging, the differences as to the degree of potassium bromate content, and all that. So I had to draw the attention of my teachers to that flaw, so that if need be, they could make some adjustments in their pedagogy. Now, the second work I did was Battens and Handcuffs, the ideology of the military police. And that work was based strictly on my experience as an air police officer in the Nigerian Air Force. You know, we had this serious burden as an air police officer of lack of trust of your colleagues. The air police officer was seen as a snitch who was looking for one opportunity or the other to do in his colleagues so as to be able to place himself at an advantage of exploiting them, ostensibly to get them out of the same problem he got them into. And the air police officer was never really trusted. And this impression did not fall from the sky because it was the same program that was following the civil police that we know, which is considered very corrupt and inefficient and full of ineptitudes, that was beginning to creep into the military culture, such that military police officers in the army or naval police in the navy or air police officers in the air force were seen as having the same character in content and purpose with the civil police. It never really mattered which arm of service you were. Once you were bearing that tag, police, the general impression among my colleagues was that police is police. So I had to write that book to put things in their proper perspective and also to enlighten my colleagues to show that the job of a military police officer is not just key to military discipline, it was also key to the perseverance of the state. Because, as I said in a chapter of that book, the collapse of the military police is the collapse of military discipline, and the collapse of military discipline is the collapse of the military. And once the military has collapsed, the state can no longer endure. So I try to draw that connection, and then to also to assuage these feelings of mistrust among my colleagues, as a way of trying to increase camaraderie within the military, milieu. And I'm happy to inform you that shortly after that book was released, so many of my colleagues who interacted with me now began to see the light. To say that even if the policeman snitched his colleague in the line of duty, it was just to ensure that the overall body of troops is not jeopardized and that the fighting efficiency of the unit is not undermined in any way, since we are just only taking out the bad eggs from the system. Now, following shortly after that is the book we are now talking about, which is Beyond the Battlefield: Understanding Strategic Military Intelligence from the Nigerian Perspective. The book, again, is also tied to my experience as an air police officer, because I realized that intelligence was key while doing my work as an air police officer. You could hardly do anything without information. I had informants everywhere, both within and outside the base, because even when the overall impression about military law enforcement tended to reside within the military barracks or base, I had instances where I had to move outside the base to get information about things that occurred within the base. So I felt that intelligence was key and it made my job easy. In fact, there was hardly anything that happened within the base, any of the bases I was serving, that I was not aware of. In point of fact, I was everywhere at every time. So I therefore felt that this efficiency of intelligence at my own micro level of an air police officer could be extrapolated to the general, doctrine of military operations, where intelligence can be taken a lot more seriously, both in terms of acquisition and processing and timely presentation. Now, added to this is the fact that the book also served, because, like we said, from a Nigerian perspective, the book also served as a guide to people outside who may want to look at the Nigerian intelligence system and feel that because it is not Eurocentric or because it is not done the way it is done in America or elsewhere, it is not good enough to show that there are also certain parameters which are sociologically censored that informs our methodology of gathering and using intelligence. The book also did part of that and many other things. You know. Now, regarding my writing processes and rituals, to be honest with you, there is no ritual anywhere. Yes, I have encountered writing blocks here and there, occasions of doubts and all that. But where I was not particularly sure about the facts, I made consultations, I researched. Unlike the buttons and handcuffs, the beyond the battlefield is purely a research work. The buttons and handcuffs was an ideological work, so there was not much of intense research that was injected into it. So there is really no ritual except that anytime I had a fact in my head, I made efforts to write it down before I forget. I think, that's the main tool I applied to ensure that I maintained focus. As for whether the book was, was manufactured out of real characters or fictitious people. First of all, the book is not a story. It is not a novel. It is a research work. It has nothing to do with characters. It has everything to do with theoretical frameworks and all that. So it's not a story, and so it is not based on any character, whether real or fictitious. Rather, there are some personal experiences, just like I've mentioned earlier, that had to prompt it. So I think that's much of what I can say in that regard. Now, asking whether I have any favorite authors or not. Yes, I have favorite authors. In fact, while studying political science at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, I had a love for the Marxist epistemology and some of the authors that were driven by that ideological bent. I read Franz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth. There were so many of them. Sameh Amin, uh, Professor Cloud Ake of blessed memory. So many of them. I was um, particularly excited by much of Cloud Ake's works, Social Science as Imperialism, Democracy and Development in Africa, which remains a very relevant book today. There is also Revolutionary Pressures in Africa, there are also a Nigerian political economy of Africa, so many books, and I loved his style of writing. I still love it anyway. Now, as for my strategy of handling writer's block, I have mentioned that earlier. Once there is any block, I take my time to, research further, to make consultations, and to see whether there is any new material that could, because I always see every challenge as an opportunity. If I'm writing a particular chapter and I run into a cul-de-sac, I always like to go back and use that opportunity to see if there's any new thing I could dig out, to enhance the quality of the book. Now, the challenges associated with my writing style, well, I would say that apart from the comparative federalism, material that I contributed to the Journal of the National Association of Political Science, where I was using more of a closely knitted, logical, and almost Marxist method. The two books I have written, The Buttons and Handcuffs and the Beyond the Battlefield, are mainly of the liberal epistemology. And of course, the liberal epistemology has always been, denigrated as a very shallow epistemology of writing, and to say that the real problems of society are not really addressed in liberalism. That liberalism is ahistorical. It treats facts as if they are not connected to each other. So I know that many of my colleagues who know me After reading that book, we want to wonder why I chose to adopt the liberal epistemology. But what I feel is it must not always be the Marxist style all the time. You have to be flexible in your writing. If what you are trying to describe, the phenomena you are trying to relate to, needs you to adopt the Marxist style, you adopt it. If it needs you to adopt the liberal style, you adopt the liberal style. There is no need for being dogmatic about a particular style of writing. So that is it. Now, what I expect people to take away from the book, well, like I have said earlier, beyond the battlefield, understanding strategic military intelligence from a Nigerian perspective is purely based on personal experience. And that experience being the, the overwhelming need for the appreciation of intelligence in both war and military operations other than war. As a soldier or as a policeman or in fact as a uniformed personnel, to put it in a very loose sense, there is hardly anything you can do without intelligence. Even the civilian joint task force that is assisting the military, the northeastern part of Nigeria, their job is mainly in the area of intelligence. And that is why this issue of community policing is coming to the front burner on a daily basis. Because people have come to realize that probably the current structure of policing that we have, which is highly centralized, does not make for adequate utilization of intelligence. Somebody who is born in Sokoto, who probably has lived in Sokoto all his life, may not be very effective if he suddenly finds himself in the police force and is deployed to Bayelsa, where it is even possible that he can't even speak the language. So, because the appreciating the role of intelligence can also affect, the military doctrine of deployment and postings. Because somebody who speaks Igbo, like myself, if I'm in any remote area of Igbo land, no matter what the dialect is, I would be able to pick the crux of the matter they are discussing and be able to relate it to my superiors. It contrasts to somebody who is coming from maybe Borno State, who does not understand the language and who may even be in the midst of these people but may not understand what they are saying. So the crux of that book is that we should not just appreciate intelligence, we should also factor in intelligence whenever we are making doctrinal amendments, especially in terms of postings and other deployments. Thank you very much for having me.
Welcome back and thank you for staying tuned. You have heard. You have heard from Mr. Obasi. He's a prolific writer and he's a great speaker. And you need to go through his book to really see the content, to understand his perspective, to understand the perspective of an insider. You really need to read that book. It's been a pleasure having you on set today, Mr. Obasi. Thank you again for doing us the honors. And here on Climax, we come to the end of today's episode. And until I come your way next time, keep living and goodbye.